Hey, what's up? How's it? Aloha. Welcome to Culturised. This is where we get to come hang out with some friends, special guests, and everyday Hawaiians that are perpetuating culture somehow in their life. We're going to get right into it. My guest joining me today, I've known this brother since we can remember. High school days, we were boarders at the oldest school west of the Mississippi. We'll find out what school that is. And I'm pretty sure we can have an entire show on just the things we got into at that high school. Anyway, he's a graduate of that high school and also Harvard, received a PhD in political science from the University of Hawaiʻi Mānoa, teaches Hawaiian history at the Kamehameha Schools, is a lecturer at the Matsunaga Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution at UH Mānoa, a former Fulbright scholar. His research focuses on Hawaiian land tenure. He's got over 50 publications written for The Nation, Hawaii Review, The Contemporary Pacific, and many, many other publications. He's a regular contributor to, of course, Kawaiʻola, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs newsletter. Co-wrote the screenplay for the feature film The Islands. And, of course, my very good friend and fellow boarder, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Umi Perkins. So, of course, with CDC, we're going to always, it's a cultural show. I'd give it on you, but that's for you. Mahalo for being here. Lei Kukui, as we know, the kukui, the lei that everybody sees, represents knowledge. Right, the kukui is the light, and that's knowledge, and you have. So, local culture, every time we see each other, you meet somebody new that we don't know each other. What high school you went?
Well, let me preface it by saying I often get, you went to Kamehameha, right? Do you remember this and this? And I always say, don't be sacrilegious, Lahainaluna.
Give me high fives for that. Yeah.
Oldest school in Hawaii. A lot of people think Punahou is the oldest, but Lahainaluna is 10 years older. 1831.
Isn't it funny how you always feel good when somebody does that? Oh, you went to Kamehameha. And in the another show I was talking about, all my Kamehameha friends, I always say, you're welcome. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, if not for Lahainaluna, education wouldn't be here. But do you get that a lot? People assume Kamehameha, Punahou, Iolani. And when what is their reaction when you say Lahainaluna?
Some people say, where is that? And I have to say, in Lahaina, Maui. But then they think, I'm from Maui. But being a boarder, that makes for some confusion. But yeah, it makes for a really unique experience we have, growing up culturally. I always think of Lahainaluna as kind of the industrial Hawaiian experience. I mean, yeah, we had malama'aina growing food on the farm, but we were... I hate to say the spring DDT, right, in the 80s on those crops.
People never believe me. People never believe that we were maskless. We had jeans and a T-shirt on and that big, huge canister of DDT and Roundup.
Steel toe boots, though.
Steel toe boots, can't forget those. So Lahainaluna, if you didn't know, it's the oldest school west of the Mississippi, and it's the only public boarding school in pretty much America, right? And you and I had the opportunity. So me being originally from Lanai, every male in my family went there, so I went. What was because you guys at the time were living where? Before high school, before we met?
Yeah, so we had gone, when I was 9, my whole family moved to the South Pacific, to Tonga, the Kingdom of Tonga. So I lived there for almost 60 years, and Tonga is a very, very slow place, maybe like Lanai.
Right.
So it's a great place. I'm very fortunate to have lived there, but not a great place for a teenager looking for excitement. So Lahainaluna was a way for us to come without our parents, come back. And my grandmother went to Lahainaluna.
That's right. I was going to say, so both of us, there's this lineage that we had. So was it one of those things that parents and grandparents were like, well, that's where you're going to have to go?
It was, there was no way to go to Kamehameha because of the application window. So right. Lahainaluna, it just made sense when we started to think about it.
And so I know that you're at Kamehameha now. So this is the question. If you had that choice in your adult life now, where would you have chosen, Lahainaluna or Kamehameha?
I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Lahainaluna, academically, it's not one of the top schools, but
right.
when I think about the discipline that we got in the boarding department, I credit that with a lot of the things that I've been able to see through to completion. I mean, a lot of people start PhDs and don't finish,
Right.
and that takes a lot of endurance. So I kind of credit being able to finish while working and having a family to two things, Lahainaluna and distance running. I think both of those things gave me a lot of stamina to be able to kind of follow it through to the completion.
And that's what I like that you say that, because Lahainaluna was a huge part of my adult life. So a lot of people think it's weird for me when I say how much I've brought with me from high school. But I don't think they realize we lived in it. So let's talk about that. Your professional life now, are there moments when you go, like we were talking about earlier, like, whoa, I got my PhD because I was a distance runner. I knew what it meant to finish things. Do you share that with your kids?
I do. It's one of those things where sometimes I'll tell them that I'm one of the few people in my generation who can say, in my day we had it hard, because most people our age, it's kind of like, oh, I used to have to stand up and turn the channel by hand, right. And that's about it. Life was pretty easy. But for us, 20 hours a week working the name Lahaina means cruel sun, right? It was like brutal, digging ditches, making sprinkler systems,
I always like to think that's why we went another way. Like, I'm thinking, man, we were building things. We were digging holes. We were picking fruits. We were taking care of swine and feeding, collecting slop. And I'm thinking, wait, maybe we better go that educational route and not dig holes for the rest of our life. Is that what were you on that route already?
Well, when I think about Lahainaluna and then what I do now, I think the big connection is this idea of tradition. We were pretty strong into the traditions. I've been going up to the Pu'upa'upa'u and visiting David Malo's grave. David Malo is the greatest Hawaiian scholar of all time, in my opinion. And he's buried up there. He wanted to be away from the encroachment of Western, sort of ticking things over, and it never did reach up to the top of that mountain. And then singing Yonder Lahaina Mountains on the top, those traditions, again, it was kind of a little bit industrial, but between that and living in Tonga, because Tonga was kind of like Hawaii in the 1880s. Wow. In the 1980s, when I was there, they had horses and carts. The Constitution of Tonga is basically borrowed or plagiarized from the Hawaiian Constitution of 1852 in the kingdom. And so it was like living in Hawaii 100 years earlier. And so between that and the Lahainaluna kind of traditions, it's almost like predestined for me to become a Hawaiian history teacher. So that's sort of how I think of it now in retrospect. And you're never going to know these things at the time that they're happening. You just want to do other things that teenagers want to do, but you're learning your lessons.
I like that. I like the fact that these things that we've learned and we're doing in Lahainaluna affect us today, which now brings us to today. What have you been focusing on recently? So you've got publications, you've been writing. I always love going to your Facebook Mo'olelo Hawaii. What are you focusing on recently?
So I like to intertwine all my projects. So I teach high school kids, but I noticed when I had open house that the parents would come and they always say, I wish I could be in your class. Wow. And the students rarely say that. So I started to catch on that adults are actually the ones who are interested in Hawaiian history. And so kind of on a whim, I started this Mo'olelo Hawaiian history group on Facebook, and it grew without me putting in any effort to, it's just short of 5,000 members now, that's not like Gangnam Style, but it's for something academic, that's absolutely huge. So the interest is there, and I started to, and I have my blog, which I started again on a whim, was a joke. I called it the Umi verse.
And you've had it how many years now?
It started in the very end of 2011.
So you were blogging before blogging was blogs.
Oh, it was still kind of a new thing. I just wanted another venue for my ideas, and then
is that one culturally based?
Took off.
That's more of you. right?
It's
thoughts,
me
your
and all
monologue.
the aspects, but a lot of it, the readership is all, they're interested in Hawaiian history. I wrote a review of Downton Abbey once, and nobody read it. Like, they don't care what I think about Downton Abbey. But when I wrote 5 Misconceptions of Hawaiian History, that one had 2,000 views in a day. It's almost 200,000 views over the.
That's what I want to
at
talk
this point.
about in a few, right after this break. I want to talk about some significant Hawaii timeline things that happened in Hawaii that made us or brought us to where we are today. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Of course, the Hawaiian history timeline is huge. Is there certain points in the timeline that stands out to you, or you teach your kids, that not a lot of people know, even outside Hawaii, but outside of Hawaii, that made us who we are today? Like, I'll leave that up to you. Where would you want to start?
Yeah, when you think about things that influenced us today, it sort of draws you into these what if scenarios. Like, what if, so this happened, what if something else had happened? So I think one of the most interesting what if scenarios in Hawaiian history is dealing with Queen Emma. So I don't know if a lot of people know, but Hawaii had elected monarchs, right? King Lunalilo in 1872 and King Kalakaua in 1874 were both elected. And in that election in 1874, Kalakaua was running against Queen Emma. Now, the first political party in Hawaii was actually the supporters of Emma. It was called the Emmaites, sometimes called the Queenites. So, first of all, why is a Queen Emma running to be queen if she's already queen? She's running to be the monarch, the actual head of state. She's queen by virtue of being married to Kamehameha IV. So she's the widow of the king. So it seems the new research coming out is saying that she actually had the popular support. And if there had been a popular election, she would have won. But there wasn't. The Constitution called for a election only of the legislature.
Wow.
So Kalakaua won with a vote of 39-6. And so the big what if question to me is, what if Emma had won? She had the support, just not in the legislature, because Kalakaua was seen as more amenable to sugar.
Wow.
If Emma had won, she was much more pro-British. And so there would have been less American influence in that period. There had already been strong British influence under Kamehameha IV and V, and that would have probably continued on. She was a quarter English herself.
Wow.
She was raised in the Church of England, so there's all this English influence. England had already signed a treaty saying they'll never take over Hawaii. So, you can draw your own conclusion about what.
We would be sitting here, what if we would be sitting here with British accents?
Quite possibly.
Which is bizarre to me. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that's a huge, so this happened in what years in Hawaii about?
So 1874, that's, the first
Right.
elected monarch, he dies. He had tuberculosis, so he reigned for only 13 months.
Wow.
So there's quickly another election, and Kalakaua ends up having a long reign after that. He reigns longer than Emma lived. But then I'm very pro Emma. My wife is the principal of St. Andrew's Priory, which she founded along with Queen's Hospital. So Emma's a major, major figure to me that's not appreciated quite as much as she should be.
From there, other things that stick out. I like that. I like how you put it, the what ifs in history. What other things in history on our timeline that would actually, in that terms, make us not what we are today, which is crazy. We could be having British accents. What other things that you see historically that could have changed us drastically?
Yeah, so the other big one that stands out, there's a character that I'm always fascinated with, which his name is Albert Kunuiakea, and he was the son of Kamehameha III, but illegitimate. His mother was not Kamehameha III's wife. She was the daughter of John Young, and so he could have been king, and that would have changed things.
Okay, hold that. I want to get into that because this is the first time hearing of that.
So when I think about it, he's born 2 years before Kamehameha III died. This is Albert Kunuiakea is his name. That's a pretty radical name. If you think about it, it's a god of war.
I was just going to say.
So he's not the heir to the throne. The young chief who becomes Kamehameha IV, Alexander Liho. Liho is heir to the throne. But if you think about it, Albert is the grandson of Kamehameha I. I mean, he's very much in a direct line. But because the missionaries had come in with this idea of illegitimacy, which never existed before, he's not in the line for the throne. If he had been, he would have been Kamehameha IV. So he would be Kamehameha IV from 1854, and he lived till 1903. So we'd have had a king on the throne for 40 years at the time of the overthrow. If you have this older, strong male monarch who's been on the throne so long, like, does it make the overthrow less likely in 1893 than when you have the li'u on the throne? The sugar growers wanted the li'u because they thought a woman won't be as strong. They ended up being wrong about that. But there's all these what-if scenarios.
I was going to say, what's crazy to me is the influence, even back then.
Oh, yeah.
It's a monarchy, but then you're thinking, wow, how political is it? So it was the politics in monarchy was heavy.
Yeah, it was not. In fact, there was a Hawaiian political party that wanted a republic. They wanted a president. Robert Wilcox was the head of that party, the Liberal Party, and so you had Hawaiians who opposed the queen in a way, but when she was overthrown, they ended up fighting to reinstate her. That's the rebellion in 1895.
So what if, I'm thinking about it right now, in your opinion, in your mana'o, if he was king at the time of the overthrow, you think it would have happened? Or he would have just said, I'm killing all of you?
It's really hard to say. I think you could safely say it makes it less likely because he's just the grandson of Kamehameha the First is on the throne.
So you already know.
His authority, his right to rule is unquestionable.
That's crazy.
But for the illegitimate aspect.
That's a huge what if. I didn't realize that could have changed the whole entire trajectory of who we are today. I mean, as far
Very much so.
Wow, that's unreal. Moving on with history. One last thing, short that another thing that would have changed who we are.
Well, I think we should get into the area that I've done the most research in. You mentioned it was land tenure is my area. My dissertation was on the Kuleana Act, and I think what a lot of people don't know about that, the common received wisdom is that that led to the loss of land, the privatizing land in the Mahele in 1848, which created the system that we still live in today. Led to the loss of land, but actually what that system did was embed the rights to land for Makainana. And that's what we saw on Kauai with Mark Zuckerberg, is he has to fight all these heirs who still have claims in that land in his 700-acre parcel. So it's very, very relevant today, something that goes back to 1848, 1850.
Is it just more difficult to fight it today? I mean, because did they have palapala? Did they have paper back then that said, hey, I am the heir, or as we know, as we're in an oral society, or oral culture, I mean, how do they prove that?
No, they did have paper, but some of the lands were named by name only, not by maps. And so you had to get a survey done, and that cost, the cost was prohibitive for some. But the main problem is there's so many heirs to those lands. And that's, you might be a 1/400th heir to a land that.
So we could never even know. I mean, there's so how much land is there right now that. Yeah.
No, you have to do the research parcel by parcel.
Wow.
So there's a guy in Lahaina who actually got his land back from Pioneer Mill, Ke'aumokukapu. Yeah. So he's the one. Whenever people ask him how did you do it, he says, "Do your homework."
So
study the land tenure system.
Homework and fight.
The rights are there. They're embedded in there even today.
Wow.
So that's something most people don't know.
Quick question as we slowly wrap up. When you grew up learning culture, being in the culture, even Tongan culture, Hawaiian culture, how do you see culture today, I mean, being practiced in your mana'o, in your thoughts? Is it too much? Is it too less? What do you think?
Yeah. I'm very encouraged by the Hawaiian Renaissance, which started in the early 70s, that it's still, it's stronger than it's ever been, really. And so the way I think about it is that it's sort of like the base of the pyramid, if you like the people, Hawaiian people, are building up that base. The pinnacle might be sort of like the rulership, but the base has to be there, and that's the culture, that's institutions and education.
You heard it from Dr. Umi. It's all about the culture and how your culture rises. Stay risen. Welcome back to Culturised, sitting with my good friend, Dr. Umi Perkins. You guys are in for a treat. We got the extended version right now. You want to see more of it, check out our YouTube channel. We want to get right back into land tenure. That's what you studied. And we're talking about land tenure back from the Mahele. How much does that affect us even today?
Yeah, I think a good jumping in point is this gate that we see on the public access to the beach in Kailua. So that is a blocking of access rights, right? So the Pash decision said in 1995 that there should be open access to Mauka and Makai, the ocean and the mountains. And so gates like that are, as far as I can tell, absolutely illegal. But that's one part of what they call native tenant rights. And the other part of native tenant rights is actually in the Mahele, in the Constitution of 1840, the right to get a fee simple property, which is way, way beyond access rights, right? That's how Hawaiians initially got these lands that they call kuleana lands. And so part of what I've said in my research is that the access rights have sort of overshadowed the more fundamental rights to get fee simple title. And then the question is, what was the deadline for doing that? That's a very difficult question, because it was pushed all the way back into 1909. So in the territory, they're still doing these granting out of kuleana rights and giving free land to Hawaiians.
It's
essentially
it's just to say they were giving free land to Hawaiians, and look at us today. We got to fight tooth and nail. We got to go through courts. We got to go through all that. It's really bizarre to me, and we can go on and on about that. But it's amazing of the things you hear and the revelations of land tenure and how easy it should be, right? And it's not.
Yeah, I think the fundamental thing is why is it free land? And the reason is that in the Constitution it says the land is owned by three classes: the king, the chiefs, which is really described as konohiki or managers, and the makainana, or what they call the hoa'aina. And so together they own all the lands. So why did they get it for free? Because they already own it. And that's a fundamental thing that a lot of people don't really understand. It's not giving away land. It's dividing out the interest in the land that you're already the partial owner of. That's what the mahele was.
It's always going to intrigue me. Something else that intrigues me, history teacher, we know how we were taught history growing up, elementary through high school.
Yeah.
How, today, as a Hawaiian, specifically Hawaiian history teacher and a Kanaka, how do you think Hawaiian history is being taught today? Not just in Hawaii, but, outside of here. Thoughts on that?
Oh, well, outside of here, that's a whole... But I don't want... It's easy to just criticize. I should say at the outset that the state of Hawaii, much to its credit, requires Hawaiian history in the public schools. That's something they didn't necessarily have to do. And so every public school student gets it. They get a Hawaiian culture kind of class in 4th grade. They get a Hawaiian kingdom in 7th grade, and then they get modern Hawaiian history in 9th grade and sometimes 11th. And the only issue then is getting qualified teachers in those positions, because that's considered social studies. So then to be a social studies teacher, you have to pass the praxis test, and that's a very broad social studies test. You got to do economics and U.S. history and world history and no Hawaiian history.
Wow.
So it's like a catch-22. Either you can pass the praxis or you know Hawaiian history. It's pretty unlikely that you're going to know both. You can if you just sort of learn over the years, but a 24-year-old coming out of university is unlikely to be able to do both of those things. So they're stuck.
How do you change that?
Well, one part that I've done, I was fortunate and it was kind of an honor to be put as the Hawaiian history lead on writing the new standards.
Wow.
So the standards are rewritten. It wasn't myself alone, but there was a group of us. And so, that's one piece of the puzzle. The next piece is curriculum. So on that front, I'm on sabbatical right now from Kamehameha. So, a lot of people say I'm on sabbatical when they got kicked out of something or they got fired, but I'm really on sabbatical, to write a Hawaiian history textbook. And it's we're pretty close to a contract with Kamehameha Publishing. It's going to happen.
Because the first I heard about it, I was pretty amazed. Not a lot of people would say, yeah, I went to my friend's TED Talk. Right? Yeah. And you talked about rewriting the Hawaiian history book, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, and I needed a sabbatical to finish that up. It can't really be done in the after school.
So where do you start? I mean, whenever I have conversations with people, I always say, well, where does your historical clock start?
Yeah.
In a history book of Hawaii, like, where do you start?
Yeah.
Like straight Kumulipo or?
Yeah, mine is Kumulipo.
No way.
And
Wow.
partly that's because that's when you talk about growing up with your parents and what did they teach about culture. My mother's research for 35 years was on Kumulipo.
Wow.
And it never quite got completed, so I'm just starting to try to think about how to take that back up. And one way I can start is to start the textbook with that. And my first post in the on my blog on this series, Molelo series, I call it, was Kumulipo, just to start at the starting point.
That's just deep in and of itself. So you're actually, so now this history book, when done and published, just for Hawaii, or like you're going to be like, we're going to send this out to all these other schools on the continent and be like, no, this is it. No,
just for Hawaii. I mean, it's about 200,000 kids in the DOE, and a tenth of them are taking one of the Hawaiian history classes. Wow. So a fifth of them are taking some kind of Hawaiian history at any given time. So it's a big enough market.
Wow.
And
that's an amazing feat. So when I was watching your TED Talk, I was just like, wow, because you don't think about those. You don't think about the people that write these scholastic books. I mean, from that, I'm just like, wow, my friend is going to do that. Amazing. So what trips me out as we wrap up is that from you and I sweeping parking lots with coconut frogs
don't forget the weed whackers.
I know. We thought we were the best. I mean, people hate us. And then we graduated to blowers, right? Yep. And the things we did at Lahainaluna, that people would just be like, what the heck? And it's almost as though you think about, it's like, oh, these Lahainaluna boarders, don't think they're going too many places, right? And then what you've accomplished today, I think, is very important because, like a previous show, they said it doesn't matter where we come from, we just know where we're going. So huge congratulations to you and all the things that you're doing. Before we leave, one thing you can say to people about culture, whatever it is, whether it's ethnic, native, or social, what?
I actually looked up an anthropological definition of culture before the show.
That's so you.
And it's really, but what really strikes me about it is that culture is made up of those things that are assumed. So in that way, culture is often invisible. Those things that you do and that you don't think about. So if we're talking about culture, then you have to start thinking about those things, and are those the right things to be doing? As we move into a time where things are very uncertain, we have to start questioning those assumptions. Should we change some of the cultural parts of local culture, for example? Even something like driving cars, that's trucks and things like that. It's pretty much part of local culture, but how long can we continue? So I think that's where the tipping point of thinking about culture and moving into the future is at.
Wow, amazing. Again, Dr. Umi Perkins, thank you very much for being here, sharing your manao, your iki, your knowledge, educating. That's what it's all about. We want to share our culture on every level. We got to thank Star Advertising for giving us a venue to hang out and sit with friends and special guests, learn culture, share culture, as I say, preserve, perpetuate, and practice. Also got to thank Jam's World, I think I'm gonna get you some of these. With these, you're gonna go
try
to
to pull them
class,
off.
and your kids will be like, Dr. Umi, right? But one of the great things about Jams World, there's causes to their shirt. So like this shirt specifically, proceeds go to food bank. So we got to thank them for it. We got to thank Kappa Kava as well. So continued success. It was always good to see you, and we'll see you soon. Mo'olelo Hawaii History is on Facebook. Umiverse on WordPress. Yep. Where else can we find you? Or you don't want us to?
YouTube channel, just my name, Umi Perkins.
I like it. Again, thank you very much. So again, thank you for joining us for Culturised. Always remember, whatever your culture is, make sure you're doing something to make it rise and stay risen.
Yeah, so Kamehameha the Fourth, he fell prey to a rumor that his wife was having an affair with his secretary. They have male secretaries at the time. And so he believes this rumor, and he shoots the secretary. Henry Nielsen was the name.
Wow.
And then they find out that the rumor is not true. But the friend doesn't die from the shooting. He lives for 2 more years, and then he finally dies. So King Kamehameha the Fourth feels really, really horrible about this. And it's kind of tragic, because then right around that time, then his son dies, and then he dies soon after. And that's why Emma's nickname became Kaleleo Nalani, the Flight of the Chiefs, because
I had no idea.
Her son and her husband flew away. Yeah.
Wow. So who started that rumor, you think?
We don't know.
Because I'm thinking, it's got to be some opposition, of course, or just somebody was like, I don't like that guy.
No, that was about the time when they started talking about annexation and starting a republic, getting rid of the monarchy, right around that time.
That's a great story of another one of those what ifs.